That's it. Sanctions are over. Russia's leverage is broken. The only thing left to do is to spew bile. You and I have already spoken many times about the fact that Western sanctions have been a complete failure. Yes, they have caused us certain problems. For example, the start of serial production of the new MS-21 medium-haul aircraft and the updated Superjet 100 short-haul aircraft was shifted to the right because we urgently had to replace all imported components. And only after solving this task and conducting a full cycle of certification tests will both airplanes go into production. However, we have already noted more than once that Russian folk proverbs are not made from scratch, because very often they turn out to be true. And this time, everything happened exactly as our proverb says. There was no happiness, but misfortune helped. The sanctions that the West imposed on us were, of course, a misfortune. What is good in them? But they did not bring us down or bring us to our knees. On the contrary, they brought us happiness in political, legal, economic, financial, food, and many other spheres. We have gained sovereignty, getting rid of the dictate of the West. And the most important thing is that the sanctions hit hard the lobbyists for the purchase of Western equipment, showing that for political reasons, Western manufacturers can at any time stop supplying their goods and close their production facilities in Russia. In this way, Western politicians did not punish us, but knocked the stool out from under the feet of the supporters of international cooperation and globalization, who were both in the government and in the parliamentary corps. And now none of them is even stuttering about the fact that we do not have to do everything ourselves, but can buy something somewhere. Therefore, we will firmly and steadily move towards gaining another component of independence, technological sovereignty. Because of the sanctions, we have a noticeable economic growth, especially in the manufacturing industry, but the Western countries, having launched a sanctions boomerang at us, missed, and the boomerang hit them in the head. They deprived their countries of our cheap energy resources, our very promising and, most importantly, solvent sales market, and helped us to come to our senses, discard liberal market dogmas, and start emphasizing the restoration of our industrial potential. The government, without regard to the WTO, introduced various protectionist measures and began to implement an import substitution program, as a result of which our country will restore lost competencies in some industries where we have lagged behind, for example, in microelectronics and machine tool construction, and gain full technological sovereignty. That is, the confrontation with Western countries has finally prompted us to get off the oil and gas needle and be concerned about investing in the development of non-resource sectors of the economy, increasing the production of various goods inside the country, rather than buying them with the proceeds from the sale of raw materials, as some backward country. At the same time, the Western leaders were so deaf, the voice of reason, that instead of being able to somehow compete with rapidly growing economic rival China at the expense of our cheap resources, they, trying to punish us, punished only themselves by giving our and Chinese producers the Russian market, raising the cost of their goods and lowering the cost of Chinese goods. Now the Chinese, not the Europeans, get our resources at the most delicious prices, and the trade turnover between our countries is rapidly increasing. If in 2021 the trade turnover between Russia and China amounted to $146 billion, in 2022 it increased to $190 billion, and in 2023 it reached the current record of $240 billion, increasing by 26.3%. Yes, and the growth continues in the first months of 2024. At the same time, 90% of all payments between our countries are made in rubles and yuan. Yes, we are not China's main trading partner, and we are unlikely to become one due to Russia's smaller population compared to the EU and the US. However, the trend so far is that Russia's trade turnover with China has grown significantly in 2023, whereas China's trade turnover with the US fell by 11.6% to $664 billion, and China's trade turnover with the EU fell by 7.1% to $782 billion. And this trend clearly does not make Western elites happy. They strongly dislike the fact that our countries dare to challenge their world domination, actively cooperate, and help each other to resist sanctions. And at the same time, they are actively developing, but there is nothing they can do about it. So all they can do is spew bile. The visit of our president to China was in the spotlight of the world media, which discussed and analyzed the talks between Xi and Putin. Several analysts said that such a luxurious reception of Putin in Beijing was a flick on the nose, very offensive to the West. To prove that they are indeed exhausted and have nothing more to press Russia, here are the words spoken by Richard Haass, the US president's foreign relations advisor, in the studio of CNBC. Host, you see this picture and what do you make of it? Richard, about Putin and Xi? This is the construction of an axis that has been going on for 2 years now, an axis of evil, an axis that is openly opposed to an American-dominated world. We add from ourselves, yes, how dare they? He goes on to say, the Chinese have gotten closer to the Russians. Today we live in a world where all hopes for cooperation and collaboration between the great powers have been blown out of proportion. We would add, and the blame for this, of course, is not on the United States, which is bothering the whole world, but on those who do not want to live in a world dominated by America and the dollar. He goes on to say, and the main question now is this: what can we achieve in international politics, and what can we avoid? Unfortunately, none of these countries are our partners. Host, do we have leverage? Richard, on Russia? None. End of dialogue. Well, that's all cleared up. The sanctions are over. No, of course, they will still try to introduce something, but as we can see, they have already realized that all the levers have been used and Russia has not broken and will not break. Not only that, they have almost no leverage left in relation to China. Not even a month has passed since Secretary of State Blinken flew to the Middle Kingdom and threatened Chinese banks and companies with sanctions for cooperating with Russia. However, Putin's meeting in China with all possible honors, with a band, a military parade, and red carpets clearly showed where the Americans can shove their threats. The only thing Western experts disagreed on was whether Russia, China, or vice versa needed Russia more. Well, let them continue to argue. But we understand very well that it would be very difficult for both China and Russia to stand alone against the collective West. That is why there is interdependence in relations between our countries. Russia has a huge scientific potential, a large territory with a variety of resources, fresh water and arable land, the most advanced weapon systems, has exclusive technologies in many areas, has trade routes across land and ocean, and China has a huge economic potential, finances, and also has technologies in some areas in which we are still lagging behind. So we are now complementing each other perfectly, and I hope that together we will achieve victory in the struggle for a just and multipolar world.